You are good to go.
All right, thank you very much. Well, good afternoon and welcome to the Board Legislative Committee meeting of the East Bay Regional Park District on Friday, June 16th. 2023, we're beginning at 12:34. So welcome everyone. I do need to read this into the record. This meeting is being conducted by video teleconference at the following additional location. 140 Red Cloud Road, Fort Novosel, Alabama, 36362, from which location Director Colin Coffey will be participating. This video teleconference location is open to the public, and any member of the public has an opportunity to address the Board of Directors or committee from the video teleconference location in the same manner as if that person attends the regular meeting. So you're welcome to participate in this meeting. We'll have public comments coming up. And Ashley, would you read?
Yes. Today's meeting is held pursuant to the Brown Act. The East Bay Regional Park District intends to hold meetings through a hybrid platform of in-person and remote attendance to allow members of the public to participate via remote attendance through the Park District's virtual platform, Zoom. The Legislative Committee members and designated staff will, with limited exceptions, participate in person at the Park District headquarters, 2950 Peralta Oaks Court, Oakland, California. Occasionally, members of the Legislative Committee may attend remotely pursuant to the Brown Act as amended by AB 2449.
Thank you very much. And now will you take the roll call, please?
Yes, this is Ashley Grenier, Recording Secretary, taking roll. Director Sanwong? Here. President Waspy?
Here.
And Director Coffey?
Here.
All right, Park District staff participating in this meeting include Deputy General Manager Dr. Ana Alvarez, General Counsel Lynn Bourgeau, Chief of Government and Legislative Affairs Eric Feeler, Legislative and Policy Management Analyst Lisa Baldinger, myself, Acting Legislative Assistant Ashley Grenier, our Federal Advocate Peter Umhofer, State Advocate Doug Houston, and we have our PrimeGov staff assisting us today as well. I will now state the ways that the members of public can submit public comments. Today's meeting, as I mentioned, is held pursuant to the Brown Act. We're providing live audio and video streaming. Members of the public wishing to make a public comment can do so live via Zoom by submitting an email or leaving a voicemail. This information is noted on the agenda. And if there are no questions about the meeting procedures, we will begin.
Seeing no questions, we'll begin with the Deputy General Manager's comments.
Chair Waspy, members of the board committee. I just wanted to start the meeting by sharing with you that on May 23rd, the California Natural Resources Agency released a draft strategy for its Outdoors of All initiative. And this strategy is rooted in the Pathways 30 by 30 initiative and includes how governments, public agencies, and private partners can collectively build a movement to achieve equitable outdoor access in alignment with community needs. We will be very much contributing to the public comment and responding to the opportunity that's been extended by the CNRA agency to respond to the document. And I just wanted to share with the committee that we are bringing in a different approach in how we're soliciting reactions to statewide planning processes to amplify the impact. And what we're doing differently this time is that we're doing a extending a cross-organizational opportunity for any employee of the East Regional Park District who would like to share in the drafting of the comments from the Park District to join in as part of the 30 by 30 employee engagement initiative. So this is a different way of doing our response, but we feel that it's part of how we have been reimagining how we do our work so that we can accelerate conservation, tap into the good expertise of the people who are conducting the work at the front lines, as well as continue to tap into the technical expertise of our planners and our staff from other teams, such as our government and legislative affairs team. I invite you and encourage you to take a look at the document, welcome your thoughts and suggestions as we continue to draft the official response from the Park District on this important planning document that will advance additional resources at the state level to continue to take down the barriers and find pathways so that we can meaningfully engage in land conservation that also creates multiple benefits for marginalized communities in California. We do have a full meeting today. Hopefully we'll do our best to keep it to the time allowed, since there's a couple of meetings right after this. And then I'll just like to take a moment of privilege to remind the board that the next board meeting will take place in person only at the Big Break Regional Park, the Visitor Center. That's next Tuesday, June the 20th. And that concludes my comments, Director West.
Great, thank you very much. So now where can we find this document, or where can anyone find this document?
I'll send you a copy of the document, and I'll also send you the draft before we send out to the state.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you for your report. Member Sandler, do you have a comment?
Yeah. So is it available now for employees to participate and provide comments? And have we had some employees provide comments?
We have already began to receive comments. We have comments, I believe, from the planning staff as well as the representatives from design and construction. And we also have comments that are being drafted by our community outreach coordinator. So they're coming in, and we'll be collecting all of that.
Do we ever do anything, because sometimes, you can make it fun, whichever group has the most comments or participates, they win like a pizza party or something like that. Have we ever tried an incentive like that? Because there's probably a lot of really good insight out there, but maybe it's not always going to be prioritized, especially since we're in the summer months right now and it's pretty busy at our parks.
That's a great suggestion. We haven't done that here at the Park District, but those types of techniques are certainly tools are very helpful. So let us take a look at that. Yeah, thank you for this suggestion.
All right, thank you. We'll now move to a Government and Legislative Affairs report.
Eric Feeler, Chief of Government and Legislative Affairs, just introducing the item. We annually, since 2017, have provided a member of the East Bay community with a Radke Championing Advocacy Award in cooperation or in partnership with the Regional Parks Foundation. Over the years, Senators Glazer, Senator Skinner, last year, Assemblymember Rebecca Bauer-Cahan have been honored. And so for this year, we would like to have a formal conversation with the committee and make a formal recommendation to the board for the recipient that will be receiving the award this year for work previously done last year. And to present the item, would like to have Acting Legislative Assistant Ashley Grenier.
All right, let me just get this presentation started. I have just a short presentation just for some background, but hello again. I'm over here now. I'm Ashley Grenier, Acting Legislative Assistant, and like Eric said, on behalf of the Government and Legislative Affairs staff, I will be presenting our nominations for the 2023 Radke Championing Advocacy Award. And today we are seeking recommendations from you all for one candidate to present to the full board. Just as a little bit of background information, the Radke Championing Advocacy Award is awarded by the Park District and Regional Parks Foundation to an advocacy champion who advances state or federal support for the Park District. The award is named for the late Ted Radke, a member of the Park District Board of Directors, who at 36 years of service is the longest serving board member in the district's 89-year history. Director Radke established the legislative committee of the board and was committed to strengthening the district's ties to Sacramento and Washington, D.C. Previous recipients of the award include Assemblymember Rebecca Bauer-Cahan, State Senator Nancy Skinner, and former General Manager Robert E. Doyle. A full list of the award recipients can be found on our website. So this year we have two people for your consideration. The first is Congressman Mark DeSaulnier. Pictured here, you can see in orange where his district spans across the Park District and Contra Costa and Alameda counties. And here he is in a photo writing a thank you note in Sidewalk Chalk to EBRPD at his recent walk and talk town hall that was on June 3rd at Big Break Regional Shoreline. Representative DeSaulnier is a long-term supporter of the Park District and is known for championing policies that promote sustainability, environmental protection, and mitigates the harmful effects of climate change. And just last year, he secured $3 million for the future visitor center at Thurgood Marshall Regional Park, home of the Port Chicago 50. Our second nomination from our team is Assemblymember Tim Grayson. Pictured here in bluish gray is where his district spans the Park District across Contra Costa County. And here he is at a walk and talk at the Thurgood Marshall Regional Park last April. Grayson is a champion of policies that promote transportation improvements, which is in line with our goals to provide climate-friendly transportation corridors, as well as policies that help minimize the risk of wildfires. He too secured $3 million in state funding for development of the South of Bailey Road staging area at Thurgood Marshall Regional Park, home of the Port Chicago 50. And in case you want to know, another definition of champion is a person who fights or argues for a cause on behalf of someone else. We appreciate your thoughts on our recommendation.
All right, great. Are you looking for thoughts or are you looking for nomination? Or both?
Yeah, we're looking for a nomination and to hopefully do a more formal vote and motion to move. But if you'd like to chat about it
Sure.
or have comments and questions.
Let's chat. And any members of the board committee would like to chat on this? I look to my colleague Colin because he knows both of those people better than anybody here, I think.
Well, that's the problem is how do you choose between these two individuals who have been of such strong support for the Park District, especially recently. They both obtained funding for Thurgood Marshall Regional Park. Mark from the federal budget and Tim from the state budget, both last year. And I find it terribly difficult to award the Radke recognition to one instead of the other in terms of their recent work for us and on our behalf. I'll look to Eric. I'm assuming that there are additional opportunities to obviously use the Radke Award for future recognitions as well. And both of these legislators will be around hopefully for a long time. And we'll have the opportunity. So I don't know whether it's appropriate to have the a dual award. I somehow think that's diluting it a bit, and I wouldn't want to really do that. But I have a difficult time choosing. So I would certainly think that if we chose one of these legislators this year, you could designate the other in the following year or a subsequent year, depending on what's going on. So I'll kick it back to my colleagues for thoughts on that. I do want to say one thing that is readily apparent, and that is that Mark DeSaulnier has been a supporter of the Park District for literally decades. Going back, I, in my own memory, have followed Mark's career since he ran the restaurant in Todos Santos Square, TR's in Concord, and ran for city council. Was on the city council for a number of years at Concord, and then went to the Board of Supervisors, then went to the State Assembly, then went to the State Senate. And in 2014, when George Miller retired to the House of Representatives, but at every stage of his career, he's sought to be a partner, an active partner of this park district, because he feels a close kinship to the mission and purposes of this park district, and the projects we undertake and the programs we undertake. So Mark has been there, again, literally decades, from working with us from the city of Concord, from his seat on the Board of Supervisors, from his state assembly position, and ultimately as a state senator, and now obviously just last year producing significantly for us as a member of the House of Representatives. So having said that, Tim has been a strong supporter. He's been in office only, I'm guessing now, 6 years, as opposed to several decades for Mark. If there were such an award for lifetime achievements and support for this park district, Mark would qualify, probably more than any other public figure outside our own organization. So I see there as being opportunity for both of these individuals, whether it's this year or in the future. So I'll conclude with that thought.
Great. Thank you for your thoughts. Olivia.
Yes, I'm on the website right now looking at our previous award winners, and it looks like we have not awarded this to anyone, to a member representing us in Washington, D.C. So this would be the first time we would be awarding a recipient in Washington, D.C. So I think from that perspective, that also would make me lean towards supporting someone like Congressman DeSaulnier, both for his current work in Washington, D.C., but also his lifetime legacy of supporting the Park District. I'm also looking at this a little bit, so the award started in 2017, and I know we're going to talk about this a little bit later on in our meeting here, but one of the major takeaways from our recent advocacy days in Washington, D.C., it was actually a comment that Director Coffey had made about our meeting at the National Park Service, and just how the mood was very different this year, 2023, versus the previous Washington, D.C. visit. And from Director Coffey's perspective, it might have to do with, just who's in charge in Washington, D.C. So I think it's always good for us to have that connection to our representatives in D.C. And so for that, I would support the idea of awarding this to Congressman DeSaulnier, since we haven't yet given the award to someone in Washington, D.C. I do have one question about this award. One thing that I've been following fairly closely, and I know that President Waspy is very familiar with this, but with the HASPA, am I saying that right? The Hayward Area Shoreline Project. I know that's a little bit more on the, in terms of local advocacy, whether it's city or county or some special districts, but I'm just curious about that project, what type of state and federal advocacy is happening. And in the future, not this year, would we be able to consider someone who might be more from a city or county role for this award, because there is still some state and federal advocacy for that project. And really because, shoreline issues is so important to our park district.
If you're looking for a response, I think you're absolutely correct. We have advocated for work done at the Hayward Shoreline. It's been very effective. We did it in Washington with Eric Swalwell and some of our local legislators, Bill Quirk, for one. We've gotten some things. We've gotten traction. We've had the ability to get almost $500,000 that gave us a master plan. We have a master plan in place, and now we have a really, really nice plan. It's only a couple $2 billion worth of nice plan. And the thing that swamps me is the fact that we're dealing with 6 miles of the San Francisco Bay shoreline, of which I'm told there are 535 miles of the San Francisco Bay shoreline. So in the future, I think, yes, we'll need some key legislators down there to help us out at HASPA, but I think it's going to be a giant thing.
Longer term project.
And
yes.
this, I don't think anybody is there now. Bill Quirk has retired. Bob Wykowski's retired. Eric is still involved, but we're planning ahead now. We haven't done any asks yet. but we will
Okay.
in the future. And then that's true. This would be a key award for someone who would like to be a champion down there for us.
And then I wonder if we want to consider having a second award at some point in the future where the candidates would be more on that county, city, special district world, so that we still have our state and federal award here, but then we also would have a second award for someone who might be serving, at a county level position or city level position or special district position. So that's something to consider.
Eric Feeler, Chief of Government and Legislative Affairs, a couple of comments on everything that's been said. First is in terms of one per year, at least at this point, we have historically only awarded one person. I think for the purposes that Director Coffey mentioned in terms of diluting the significance of the award. That said, Senator Skinner and Assemblymember Bauer-Cahan, both in the same year, secured significant funding for the Park District. And so we're basically awarded 1 year after the other. And so that could be a scenario for this year as well. Secondly, just with regard to the shoreline in Hayward, Representative Swalwell this year, for those of us that were in the meeting with him, did indicate that he would be interested in a community benefit project ask for Hayward Shoreline next year. And I know Lisa has also approached Senator Wahab at the state level for funding for that project. And then the last item, just in terms of a local award, this was intended to be kind of an encompassing award, particularly because of Director Radke's local advocacy. But I think what I might suggest is we have a conversation with the folks that are going to be presenting our next item and sort of talk to them about what that could look like in terms of partnerships with cities and counties, and maybe come to the committee in a future date.
Do you have a recommendation?
I'll make the motion that we recommend the award be given to Congressman DeSaulnier this year.
All right. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Colin. So, okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? My only input on this would be, I too would support Congressman DeSaulnier, just based on his longevity and his relationship with the Park District for so many years. And I look forward to giving this award to Assemblymember Grayson in the future. I hope he still remains our advocate and champion. The questions I had were, how do we plan on doing this? I remember this, I personally think this is a great award. I think people really appreciate this award. We've done it statewide at some point. We concentrate on our legislators here, but we've done it for Eduardo Garcia at one point. And he came and he telling us I'm going to be a little late because I'm with Governor Brown over in San Francisco, but he wanted to get here and receive the award. He seemed to enjoy it. I think it's a benefit to us. It's a benefit to the legislator. So I hope we have a venue that is a good one, and I hope it's a good celebration. I know COVID made everything kind of weird. We've done one by Zoom. We've done one on a windy day up in Wildcat Canyon, or pardon me, in Inspiration Point. I hope we can do a venue somewhat like center or a pop-up outside an REI store, but I think we're a little more sophisticated now. I think we hopefully can do at a venue. I know that we did it at Drake's Brewery, and we've done it at a restaurant in Sacramento. And I'm not advocating for a brewery, I promise. I just think a nice venue and make a big deal out of it. I'd much rather have one word per year to one very deserving person and make it a nice big celebration. So
Thank you so much, Director Wasp. We will certainly take that into consideration. And very meaningful awards and the key partnerships that we have with our elected officials. So we will certainly take that into consideration.
great. Thank you. There's no further discussion.
I should take maybe a role to take the vote.
Right.
the
If there's no
motion?
further discussion, we will be taking a roll call vote. I'm
All right.
looking at there's no one, there are no members of the public here, so no one's got their hand up. So yes.
All
Will
right.
you take a roll call vote?
Yes. All right. President Waspy,
Yes.
Director Sanwong,
Yes.
and Director Coffee.
Aye.
All right. Motion
All
passes.
right. Motion passes unanimously. Is there any scheduled for this award? I guess we would do it at Congressman Desaulnier's when he could make it.
Yeah, we were looking at a possible date in September, but we'll have to get back to you about the specifics because we have another event in September that we might try to link it to.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you very much. We'll now move to local issues and actions taken by their jurisdictions. Brian?
Yeah, good afternoon. Brian Holt, Chief of Planning, Trails and GIS. I'm joining you remotely today. Got a couple items to share with you and we'll do so quickly. Them up on the screen here. I presume you all can see those. We got 4 items. First item today is time extension for a project called the Chain Property. This was a project that was approved 4 or 5 years ago, maybe even a little bit longer. It's on 195 acres and includes some 50 or so residents right at the corner of Bollinger Canyon Road and Crow Canyon. So you can see the site here. It is within the San Ramon urban growth boundary. Crow Canyon here, Bollinger Canyon here. We've been interested in this project because the project proposes to build a city park within the area. So let's see if I can get my little annotation thing here. Anyways, proposing to build a city park in the area and would actually include a trail that would potentially go through the open space and link up for the Calaveras Ridge Trail. So we've been monitoring it for that. Again, this was an approved project. The developer needs to take some time to either get funding or whatever lined up. So they approved a 12-month extension to the approval. So just zooming out a little bit, you can kind of see where it's at. The star here represents the project location. If you look up just farther up the road, up Bollinger Canyon Road, is our property that we recently approved the Southern Los Trompos land use plan for, and then you can see other areas of Los Trompos here, so you can see how that would sort of lead to future acquisition interests in that area. Second project is approval of the Marsh Creek Corridor Trail Feasibility Study. This was approved by Contra Costa County Board of Supervisors. This is a long-range plan that the county has been pursuing for some time that would essentially connect Clayton to Round Valley and ultimately to Brentwood if our Marsh Creek to Round Valley Regional Trail were developed, following along Marsh Creek Road. So we own a number of properties along that corridor, including Clayton Ranch, and this has been a long-term interest on the county. So we continue to monitor this project. Again, this is just a feasibility study, so in its very early stages, there's a lot of acquisition challenges that this project would face. And would would be a long-term pursuit on part of the county. The third item is the site management plan and environmental assessment for Mount Wanda. This is part of the John Muir National Historic Site. We submitted comments on this plan. You can see it here, relatively straightforward, but includes the Muir Grave Site, some trail projects throughout the Mount Wanda site, some picnic tables, and we provided comments just with regards to some of our shared maintenance responsibilities of the tunnel that goes underneath Highway 4, and some opportunities to partner with relation to some of our regional trails, the California Riding and Hiking Trail that goes through the site, and it also includes connections that would provide for Briones to Martinez Regional Trail. And last item is just one of our favorite topics, a hearing to just continue the permit parking program for for Mission Peaks. So this is a City of Fremont item that establishes permit requirements for certain houses around Mission Peak, and it was adopted for to continue for another 10 years. So with that, that's the end of my items for now. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brian. Any questions, comments for Brian? Hearing none, I was wondering, Brian, did you hear, I just heard it through the grapevine that when the city of Fremont deliberated over this, there was a great group of people, small group of people that suggested that and proposed that this restricted parking go all the time. Not just weekends and holidays, but all the time. And I also heard that some of the council members looked on that favorably. Has there been any follow-up on that, or?
I haven't heard anything to that effect, but I can follow up and see what occurred during the meeting. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. There are no other questions or comments. Thank you. We'll move to the funding and grants update. Katie, thank you, Brian.
All right, good afternoon. I'll go ahead and share my screen. All right, Katie Hornback, Grants Manager, here to give a grants update. So in your packet, there was our grants department update, which lists the grant applications we've submitted in the last period, as well as grants that have been awarded. I'll go ahead and highlight a few of the applications we submitted. So for the very first one, we submitted an application to the we submitted a pre-proposal to the Coastal Conservancy for the Tidewater Public Access Project. And just recently in the last week or so, we're invited to submit a full proposal for that project. So more to come on that. And then items 4 and 8, the ecologically resilient parklands. So we submitted basically the same application to both the Wildlife Conservation Board and the Coastal Conservancy. This is for restoration work in a couple different areas where fuels management or fuels treatment has occurred, and now the stewardship team wants to go in and do some restoration work in like Oak Woodlands area, or where the Carquinez fire was, the scenic fire was. So going in there, and both of those agencies have funding specifically for that kind of work. So that's why we submitted applications to both to see who would be interested in what projects to fund. And then the last item I'll highlight is number 7. So on an annual basis, we submit a request for Measure J funding to the Contra Costa Transportation Authority. So we were allocated funding for that, but every year we do need to pick a project in a certain subregion and present that project and formally get that appropriated. So just wanted to provide a little bit of context on that. And then, excuse me, moving into grants awarded, just one, but it was a big one. This was for $1.4 million for the Martinez Bay Trail Gap Closure Project. This is from CNRA's Urban Greening Program. Director Coffey attended that site visit back, I think it was in October. So it was a big lift through this whole process. We go through multiple steps along the way, and the site visit was certainly a key one. So really just excited about that and wanted to highlight it here. And at this time, I'll take any questions if there are any. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Katie. Any questions, comments for Katie? Seeing none, Katie, I'd be interested in the trail maintenance agreement we have and grant that we get every year. I assume it's just a formality to have to reapply for it for the Contra Costa Transportation Authority. Is that, I noticed it's $500,000. Does it constant, or is there a escalator built into that, or an inflationary CPI is what I'm asking?
So the Park District was allocated, I think it's $10 million to spend over the course of the lifetime of Measure J. That started back in 2002. And so we typically, we have to spend that 10 million equitably in the 4 subregions of Contra Costa County. And so we typically every year are asking between like 480 and 500,000 in each subregion. So we are keeping it equitable. And then by the end, I think the Measure J expires in like 2035. We will have spent our full 10 million over the 4 regions.
Okay, thank you.
So we're not required to ask for 500,000. It's just typically what we do ask for.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mhm.
If Olivia.
Yeah, so I'm familiar in Alameda County, I think are similar measures to Measure J in Contra Costa County. It's Measure B, Measure BB. Was the Park District a part of that measure? I did see that I believe it's the Iron Horse Trail Bridge in Dublin that's going over Dublin Boulevard did get some of the fundings from both the Alameda County Transportation Authority and I think Measure BB. But I'm curious, is the Park District a part of that conversation and that funding?
Well, to my knowledge, we have received Measure BB funding in the past, but it's been through competitive proposals. So whereas for this Measure J, it's all non-competitive. We're guaranteed that money. It's just we have to get it appropriated each year. So I'm not sure if there's a non-competitive version of that we've gone through, but I can certainly look into it. But I know we have received BB money just through a competitive process.
Katie, if you don't mind, I'll just chime in a little
Please
bit
do.
on Measure BB. We worked very closely with commissioners for ACTC to secure active transportation money in the expenditure plan. The way that it was written aligns the expenditures on active transportation to the Bay Trail, East Bay Greenway, and Iron Horse Trail. We believe that it also would include maintenance such as Measure J does in Contra Costa County, but it was not explicitly designated for the Park District in Measure BB. And so we, as Katie correctly pointed out, we compete competitively and maintenance funding just really isn't a very competitive project. The Measure J language was very intentional as a direct allocation to the Park District.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Katie. We'll move now to the advocacy briefings and the federal one first.
Good afternoon. I'll touch on the federal conference in Washington, D.C. and just share some initial thoughts and also answer any questions people may have. I think the meetings with the delegation and with federal agencies were very productive. And I know that there was definite appreciation and follow-up that came out of discussion with the Trust for Public Land, with the White House Council on Environmental Quality, with I've been going back and forth a little bit with the National Park Service and with FEMA as well. Just to give an example of something that was very helpful and timely in that discussion with Representative Barbara Lee. Her staff and office have been very helpful in trying to address the former Oakland Army Base cleanup issue and as it relates to the John Sutter Shoreline Regional Park. They have engaged with the Army. They also have looked at the language that was directive of getting the land to the Park District, which we've been in discussions with and waiting for the cleanup to happen, and then discussions with them and having that transferred 14 acres to the Park District. And so there's language directing that to occur, fingers crossed, in the Defense Appropriations Bill. I've also been in discussions with Representative Garamendi and Senator Padilla's office about a two-track strategy, that same language being in the Defense Authorization Bill. That's to be determined, but we're very grateful for Representative Lee's office quickly taking action in a timely fashion with the appropriations season underway. And I'll talk a little bit more about all things appropriations in a little bit. Some lessons learned. I think there is ways to approach, Washington. There's also ways to approach the delegation in district, because I think the greatest asset that the Park District has is the actual resources and parks and amazing places that you have to share with them. Walk and talks, I think, are excellent. Meetings in district sometimes are better than a meeting in a hallway of a Washington, D.C. office building. So it's a balancing act. And I just happy to have a longer conversation about it, but sometimes it's better to not be distracted by all the things that are happening sometimes that require a member of Congress to be going to a vote or be going to a committee meeting or be going to another agency meeting that they have. And sometimes it just is challenging to meet with folks in Washington versus showing off the great things that the Park District has to show off. And that is your brand. That is your best selling point, I think. And I think the board and collectively the Park District has done an excellent job at that over the years of finding ways to get elected officials to meet with the public and to see the great work that is happening. So happy to have a longer conversation about that. There are different models that organizations use when it comes to meeting with their federal officials and with federal agencies. So happy to, overall, I think it was a successful set of discussions. There's always a lot of follow-up associated with that. So happy to answer questions about the conference or just I'll continue on and just give you a very brief update on the federal budget.
Would any committee members like to have any observation on the briefings or any questions? Peter?
Go first.
Hearing none?
I'll go.
Oh, pardon me. Go ahead, Olivia.
I was waiting for Colin, but I'll go. Overall, I think it was a really great conference for myself personally. I know I learned a lot, and I think it was good to have these conversations with both our delegation and the federal agencies. And I do recognize that delicate balancing act. I mean, there's so many other things happening in Washington, D.C. I know we were there when there's a lot of conversations about the debt ceiling and the budget, and there was a lot of different votes happening. And so that can impact, the meetings that we're having, but then also maybe some of the members of our delegation were more available for us. I think that one of the best meetings, and I believe Colin probably gets a good superstar award for this, was with Congressman Garamendi. I was very impressed with Colin's conversation and the maps, and there's quite a bit of humor that also happened during that meeting. I think at one point, Colin had drawn a circle on the map and then a few seconds later drew a bigger circle. And Congressman Garamendi had noticed that and made a comment. And I thought it was a really neat moment to witness and observe and be a part of. Yes, I'm open to sharing some of that feedback. I don't know what the best forum is in regards to that balancing act of when, our delegations here in the East Bay and being able to show our parks, because I do agree that is one of our district's best selling points and our brand. And it's always a good day when we're out in the parks, versus being in Washington, D.C.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, I'll continue on the federal budget side, just real briefly, just to kind of recap, because that was happening in real time about the time that many of you were here for the federal conference. And that was on June 3rd, the president signed the legislation that lifts the nation's debt ceiling. And so that is effectively a 2-year budget agreement. It actually is a good thing in that respect, and that don't need to have another showdown in another year on what the federal budget and appropriations are going to look like. This gets through the election period until 2025. So just understand that there's going to be difficult challenges when it comes to federal funding I'm about to talk about, but this hurdle was overcome, and I think people were pleasantly surprised in many different corners. So just to remember, there were warnings by the Treasury Department that the country was running short on cash to pay its bills, and so agreement was reached to raise the country's borrowing limits. Democrats had to agree on some level of cutting of funding in order to reach agreement. There was also, quote unquote, some pieces in there related to permitting reform, specifically changes to the National Environmental Policy Act and how environmental reviews should be done in a certain time frame. happy to take that offline, but I won't digress, just to say that, raising the nation's debt limit is now at 31.4 trillion. This will ensure the government is able to pay its bills that it already incurred. Again, it's a 2-year budget agreement, this bill that the president signed, to be at fiscal year 2023 levels. You may have seen in the news that House Republicans are moving forward with bills that are funding agencies at the fiscal year 2023 level. That means $120 billion in cuts will have to be made to federal agencies across the board in order to meet that level. And so there is also in the bill itself an automatic overall 1% cut to spending programs if Congress fails to approve its spending bills by December. I predict the following, which is Congress now has 4 months to pass 12 appropriations bills to fund these federal agencies. They're a little bit behind because we're at June. The fiscal year ends on September 30th. So the appropriations committees are now moving funding bills, which is a good thing. But again, there's a difference now already between the House and the Senate. House wants to stay at the fiscal year 2022 levels because that was what some in their conference wanted. The Senate is more inclined to fund federal agencies at the fiscal year 23 levels. Some are already saying that the House is almost about to concede to the Senate because the Senate tends to prevail when these spending discussions play out. I suspect, unfortunately, there may be a continuing resolution for a period of time between September and December, and they reach agreement in December. That's my best guess at the moment. So just to share with you community funding projects, something that we've talked about in the past. This year's bills have about a 50-50 split between Democrats and Republicans. Republicans requested $10.2 billion in community funding projects. That's 1,800 projects by them, more than last year. Democrats have $9.2 billion, which is equal to about 3,200 projects. Be interesting to see where it all comes together. I'll just give you an example. We talked about this before. Representative Swalwell submitted a community funding project for the wildfire mitigation work that's ongoing. That was for $2 million. I'm told by staff that is likely not to be at $2 million. In fact, it may be $1 million or $900,000. All of these requests ended up getting a haircut when they were considered by the committee. And, take what we can get, but that's just to give you an example of what had happened there. So all to say that if the House stays on this path, there's already a lot of Republican members that are very frustrated that they stay on this path of wanting to cut these appropriation bills so much that they're going to hand the keys basically over to the Senate, and the Senate's going to run the show. We'll see how it plays out, but I've told you my best guess at the moment, which is a continuing funding resolution at current levels from September to December, and maybe reach an agreement in December. As Doug may talk about, which is leadership challenges at the top tend to then weigh down the general course of the agenda or the functioning of these important institutions, and the challenges that House Republicans are having at the moment at leadership on down are making things more challenging than normal when it comes to doing the appropriations process, which tends to be pretty bipartisan. There's sometimes some hot button issues, but they get their work done. So I'll stop there and happy to answer any questions. Appreciate everyone's time.
Questions, comments? Member Sandwell?
Yes, real quick. Thanks so much again, Peter, for organizing the conference in Washington, D.C. last month, and then also for this update since then. It's really helpful to have this understanding, and I appreciate that. And right now here at the Park District, we're going through a series of workshops where, this week we started to talk a little bit about our, we received presentations from each of the divisions within the Park District staff, where we got to hear about some of the major initiatives of the past year and what the expected initiatives are of the next year. And then coming up in July, we'll start to talk a little bit more about the East Bay Regional Parks Board interests and how that might pair with our scoring matrix for projects and our CIP plan. And so all of this is coming together within this backdrop of, budgeting both from the federal government and the state government. And I sort of have been working through my own hypothesis I'll share. It seems like there has been more funding available in the past few years from especially from the state level. And I know we'll get to this in a moment when we talk about the legislative program update at the state level, but the California state budget has really gone from what did I see? Did I see 91 billion surplus last year to this year? Now we have to come up with a completely different budget situation. And I do remember, and feel free to correct me on this, Doug, I do remember when we were in Sacramento, one of the comments someone made was that, we might have this state budget shortfall, but maybe we'll get some additional funding from the federal government. I think thinking about the Inflation Reduction Act specifically, but it doesn't really seem like that's something that's happening. So again, bringing this back to the Park District, and when we think about some of our capital projects and maybe grant funding opportunities, we may have a little bit of a trickier situation in the next 5 years in regards to these community project funding opportunities. So that's just something that I think we need to be mindful of as a board here. And it'd be helpful to maybe, polish my comments here a little bit more as we're having our conversations as a board in regards to what our interests and priorities are, because I don't think we can always rely on these community project asks and community project funding. I think it is going to be a little bit more limited, both at the state and federal level over the next few years.
I would wholeheartedly agree with you, Director Sonwong. I'm glad you raised it. Offer a couple observations. One is that you could see if the House Republicans maintain their majority and the Senate flips in their majority, community project funding can go away, or they may keep it. But I don't think it. The federal budget was fairly robust, but I only see it tightening. So there is money. There are grants available. Funding is going to get clawed back. It already is in the appropriations process. Funding is getting clawed back, some from the infrastructure bill and some from the Inflation Reduction Act. So as fast as we saw it, some of it's getting clawed back. And some of these programs, the Park District is eligible for. And so if there is something that's ready within the Park District, I would strongly encourage the Park District to apply. I've laid out in 2 different memos opportunities for the Park District, programs that the Park District is eligible for. But I also know that there is a review going on internally about prioritization. I don't know what else to say except if you want to apply now, because I'm not sure it's going to be there forever. Many of these programs are funded for, 4 years. I don't think they're going to continue after that, or at the levels that they're at right now. So I'll just say that opportunities there, consider within the confines of, priorities. But there is opportunities now, which I haven't seen in my career.
Director Sonwong, if I may just add to that a little bit, that with our legislative program designed the way it is, we are purposely and intentionally designed to be nimble. So when these opportunities in budget surpluses or big items of legislation like the Inflation Reduction Act and infrastructure become available, that have the ability to seek the opportunity But we fully recognize that that's not every year, and that there are times when seeking policy changes, or as Peter very well knows, just trying to make sure that we're eligible in programs that move forward. So we're very cognizant of not to rely on it, but when the opportunities present themselves, we want to, put our best foot forward and really try to actively apply for these funding sources. And they're pretty competitive for the community benefit projects. So it's really almost like a grant application. And the benefit of that really is that we can, even if we're not successful at the federal level, we can use all that work to submit for an existing grant program later on. So there's multiple layers to some of the strategies behind some of these asks. Just wanted to give that context.
Go right ahead.
Yes. So when we came back from the Washington, D.C. conference, the week after was the Black Birders Week program. And I'm really glad I was able to make it to two of those events, one at Ardenwood and the second at Del Val. And it was a little bit out of order because I will share that when we were in Washington, D.C., I did have a conversation with a member of Congresswoman Barbara Lee's staff about the program and how important that program is to create a welcoming environment for so many different community members. But then also one of the thoughts that I had, and I don't remember if I was able to contribute this when we were at the National Park Service, but when we were talking about Thurgood Marshall, home of the Port Chicago 50, and thinking about some of the different programming elements, I think that the Black Birders Week program that we have is a really good example of, us really the East Bay Regional Park District really meeting that, programming requirements. So I did have a conversation with the member of the team. He's a really big champion of Black Birders Week about maybe at least putting together a 1 or 2 pager about the program and reviewing the program. But I think that it is a really important one for us to continue to nurture and to have, because I think it does meet a lot of some of the different interests that I heard while we were in Washington, D.C.
All right. Great observation. Anything else for Peter? Hearing none. Go ahead, Colin. Pardon me.
It just reminds me that we've had this conversation for the last couple of years that Peter has put his finger on, and that is that we've had an unprecedented opportunity for funding from both the state and the federal governments since Biden's election and the extraordinary state budget surpluses that occurred 2 years in a row and then has reversed this year. But nevertheless, we've had this incredible opportunity now for a couple of years. And all I can say is what I think we've been, from the board perspective, we've been saying for a couple of years, and that is that management has our commitment to all the resources that are necessary, be it in-house or outside of house, to bolster our ability to apply for funding, do the follow-up work on funding, do the tracking and other work necessary to secure funds. And so I can only hope, as one member of the board, that management is taking that to heart and make sure that we are fully resourced when it comes to going after these funds.
Hear, hear. I agreed. I think we all agree. If there's nothing further, Peter, thank you so much for your advocacy and your great insights. Appreciate it. Great weekend. We'll now move to state advocacy briefing. Doug, welcome.
Hi. Good afternoon, everybody. Doug Houston, state advocate. So this has been roughly a couple months since we last met, and as prognosticated, projected, during that time, our budget picture has grown increasingly precarious in the state of California. The governor released his May revise back on the 12th of May, and that was reflective of the growing imbalance that we're experiencing here in the state between our revenues and our expenditures. And that deficit, which was projected in January to be 22 billion is now, according to the legislative analyst's office, reaching about $34 billion. So it's getting worse before it's better. But in response, the legislature yesterday adopted their version of a budget. It's not a three-party agreement. It is their version of the budget. As you probably know, they have until June 15th to adopt a budget, or their pay gets docked. So it's a bit of a faux budget at this juncture. The legislature in this budget will be subject to a lot of negotiations between the two houses and the administration over the coming weeks. But included in the May revise, importantly, is the governor, because he has such a strong commitment to climate and resources, and yet we're again faced with an imbalance. He's proposing to shed and shift some out-year funding commitments and obligations that were to be directed and dedicated to climate programming to what we've just talked about in the past, and that is a general obligation bond. Some of the areas they've identified to shed that were previously going to be funded through general fund revenues include urban greening at $100 million, what is called the statewide park program, and then community resilience centers. There's a list of other programmatic shifts as well, but I think for the purposes of this district, those three are three programs that we've competed for and been eligible for. But important to the district in this budget, and what was improved by the legislature yesterday, the legislature has made augmentations to the May revise in the following areas, and that is there's $81 million in there to the California Natural Resources Agency. How it's to be allocated is to be determined. There's a $107 million backfill to the State Coastal Conservancy. In the January budget, the governor was proposing a reduction of about 43% to the State Coastal Conservancy. And this writes that 43% cut to more like 25%. That's for adaptation purposes. $61 million to state parks. Again, we don't know how that's to be allocated. It's not really described in the budget to date. And then there's also $10 million in there for the Trails and Greenways program. One of the a backslide, if you will, coming out of this document is for nature-based solutions. All the conservancies received a sum of money to address nature-based solution projects, and they're looking for 50% reduction across the board, state's 10 or 11 conservancies. But I think they did this, again, in anticipation of a general obligation bond that is knocking on everybody's door. And speaking of the bond, 2 weeks ago, both bonds, there's 867 in the Senate and then 1567 in the Assembly, were approved in their respective houses and transferred over to the opposite houses. Pretty overwhelmingly approved. There was very little discord expressed during the debate discussion on both bonds. So as I've mentioned in the past, in that I've had a really close working relationship with Eduardo Garcia, who is the principal of the Assembly version of the bond 1567. And that relationship dating back to his arrival in Sacramento. And importantly, that I worked with him on his previous effort through Prop 68. I'm sort of back in that familiar role, working sort of as an extension of staff. More recently, Mr. Garcia's staff person on point for the bond has left. So my responsibilities, I've had to backfill some of those responsibilities. Been taking meetings with member staffs, stakeholders on the drafting of language, been organizing listening sessions throughout the state. We had one in Orange County. There's one scheduled for June 29th in Berkeley. Also a follow-up one in Los Angeles on July 14th. And then more recently, I worked with the Assemblyman's office on a press conference that we held on Wednesday on the bond. So I'm not an invisible hand. I'm truly sort of an extension of staff. And again, in that capacity, unlike other firms and other advocates, the Assemblyman's given me a little bit of latitude to work on language that's consistent with client priorities. So some of those priorities are reflected in AB 1567, which are more specific to the district, include there's $250 million in there for the Bay Area program, $375 million for a per capita program. What does that mean? What does that translate into for the district? I tried to do some number crunching, but I think it's going to be more than 10 million, probably 10 to $12 million in discretionary dollars to the district to spend as they choose. There is a regional park program, $75 million that can be applied toward environmentally sensitive vegetation management work. But I also included language in there for what's called equity destinations. And why it's in there is the district is continuously, consistently tried to apply for money through the statewide park program without much success. And that is because that program really favors more community neighborhood parks. So instead, this isn't an end around necessarily, it's just a different approach to try to get funding to regional entities to encourage folks from disadvantaged, marginalized communities into our regional park systems. $125 million for the California Conservation Corps there's a specific provision in there for the construction of a residential camp, Holly Court in Northern California. There's $50 million in there for sediment removal at possibly at Temescal and Jewel Lakes. $65 million for funding for trails, and there's a creation of a new California Trails Conservancy. And then echoing back to the statewide park program, this is a priority of Eduardo's in particular. But I've taken some liberties. It's $900 million, but some of it's going to be set aside for communities that exceed 80% of the median household income. So we get to compete a little bit more favorably in that space. And then there's also $150 million for projects to repurpose spaces that are degraded and blighted and contaminated. And just more recently, had a conversation with Eric about this, and I'm drafting the next set of amendments and hoping to include a specific reference for the funding of industrial properties along shorelines, and also funding for former military bases and installations. And then this might be music to Mr. Director Coffey's ears, but I also drafted some amendments that I'm hoping will be improved by the Assemblyman's office that will consider some funding to help underwrite the opening of Marsh Creek State Park as well. So, and then, yeah, onto the Senate vehicle. Senate vehicle, and both of these are approaching $16 billion. The Senate vehicle is not so nuanced in its approaches. It has a few more specific call outs for members, but it's really trying to direct investment toward areas such as those that are consistent with the governor and Wade Crowfoot's 30 by 30 program, nature-based solutions, resiliency and adaptation. But again, it's not as nuanced. It's all these funds are being directed through more existing programs through the various agencies. Some of the differences between the bonds, although they're minor, is that the Senate bond is really being driven by the Nature Conservancy, whereas the Assembly bond is being driven more through a lens of equity and trying to invest in built landscapes in disadvantaged areas. So there'll be a meeting of the minds that will include the administration. And I think what everybody's looking for right now is just a bit of a signal coming out of the governor's office. We're not looking for specific asks, more what is our bond threshold in the state of California? We're at 16 billion with these two bonds. What can we tolerate? And I'm hearing somewhere in the the number is going to be somewhere in the 10 to $12 billion range. So that's where the negotiation is really going to hit force. What else do we have? What is becoming more apparent is, even though the administration green-lighted these bonds or a bond, they've retreated a little bit more recently, and they're actually leveraging. I just heard this morning. I've been hearing it rumored throughout the halls, but we're hearing that the governor is trying to leverage the advancement of a bond to advance his own package of project streamlining reforms, CEQA reforms. So there's the challenges of passage of a bond still lie ahead, but I just wanted to reinforce that and underscore that what I just mentioned in terms of those asks for the district are very specific to the assembly bond. So it's going to be all hands on deck. Going to need board members, going to need management, need the advocate to try to work with the Senate and Senate leadership to try to incorporate some of those asks into the Senate version, or at least the final negotiated version of the bond, to ensure that, again, we can compete for some of these dollars. So with that, I'll take questions, comments, concerns.
Any questions from committee members? Go ahead.
Are you participating in some of the listening conversations that you had mentioned earlier in regards to the bond and trying to determine the threshold? I'm just curious about how some of those are set up and how that information is, gathered and processed.
I'm sorry, Director, you said the listening sessions?
Yes.
So they're really being initiated by legislators in areas, asking Eduardo to come visit and share information about the bonds, and in turn, listen to the participants and gather feedback from the participants in terms of what they like about the bond, what they propose, maybe some proposed improvements to the bond, what they don't like about the bond potentially. Not that he's going to be incorporating all that feedback into the bond necessarily, but we, myself included, we operate in a vacuum largely up here in Sacramento, and we can't pretend to know what the priorities are of Orange County versus San Diego versus even the Bay Area. So then that's why he being Mr. Garcia has consented to take part in a listening session on the 29th and it's been facilitated through Together Bay Area, working with our office. And I will be down there to provide technical assistance to the group.
And did we do something similar during the Proposition 68 pre-work?
Not very much. I think there might have been one or two listening sessions during summer recess leading into the advancement of the bond.
I suppose that's most of my questions. I just do find it so interesting. I just looked up the details in regards to our state budget situation, because I know it's been getting a lot of headlines, but it is an important one. So yeah, it is. I see numbers 97.5 billion surplus on the previous year, and now we're working on a budget gap of 31.5 billion.
Yeah, and the way he's balanced that, he being the governor, there was a redirection and delay or deferment of obligations toward expenditures in climate. So instead of making those investments, he's asking to work with the legislature to shift those investments into a general obligation bond. That's where we're at.
And Director Senwell, just to build on comments Doug made earlier, what has been passed is kind of almost like an interim proposal. We're expected to receive additional revenue in October. This year, the state forgo paying income taxes because of the atmospheric river events until October 16th. And then we're also very keenly watching what's happening with the Fed and interest rates and how that interfaces with the market, because the revenue for California largely is dependent on, obviously, as you know, the high income earners that are the larger investors in the market and also invest in startups and provide that kind of funding. So I think it's to be determined where we'll ultimately land by the end of the year. But I think the governor is proceeding with diligence and caution in an anticipation of less revenue, which we're probably never going to have a year like we had last year, but it may stabilize itself a little bit between now and the end of the year.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Thank you. Colin?
Yeah, I just want to emphasize appreciation for Doug's rather intimate involvement in the development of the bond, at least on the assembly side, and what reconciliations take place. This is hugely beneficial to this park district, Doug, and so I just wanted to emphasize appreciation for your efforts.
And it should be noted, I didn't want to build any false expectations, hearkening back to the community benefit projects. But a carrot that's been thrown out there appears to be something that I identified in the budget, that there might be a set aside of several $100 million for member requests. So I've had an exchange with Lisa and Eric this morning about reminding our legislative delegation that we do have some members' requests pending. So if the money does in fact free up, that we're positioned to take advantage of it.
And if I may, also want to thank Doug's team for his support and assistance in putting together a listening session on the bond here in the East Bay with our partners at Together Bay Area. And so that'll be happening on June 29th, and we'll go ahead and get that invitation out to board members. You are welcome to attend, as East Bay Parks is a member of Together Bay Area.
Yes. Well, thanks, Doug, thanks for your experience and expertise. You seem to always get us involved right up close, and truly appreciate it. I'm wondering, do you have, I've heard that theory that things will get a little bit better on October 15th because everybody's held off. Do you share that view?
No.
Okay.
No, and I'm not alone. Department of Finance, Legislative Analyst's Office, they're doing revenue projections right now, regardless of what transpires on October. So the sense is that we're going to be into sort of a structural shortfall situation, probably 2 to 3 years out. The silver lining perhaps is that, they've tried to put together a spending package that doesn't tap our reserves at $25 billion. So, in these out years, if things do get more complicated, we can draw from them. But I think that the years of multi-billion-dollar surpluses, particularly $97 billion surpluses, are a thing of the past, at least for the next half decade to decade.
All right. And assuming everything goes well, or won't go as planned, but assuming we do get a bond out, will it be in the primary in 2024 or November in 2024?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Right now, I have to go back and look at both bond vehicles. I think they're both calling for March of 2024, which means obviously that we would have to pull this together by the end of this year to have an adequate campaign runway going into March. I suspect that it's 50-50. If I were the administration, frankly, I don't know how quickly I would play the bond, because they might want to shed more general fund if things get worse into the bond next year. But I don't want to give them any ideas, but it's hard to say right now which cycle. And there's going to be polling, and I think there's some polling underway right now, which I think is a little premature. But I think everybody wants to have a reasonably good sense going into the next year's election cycle, what would be the better opportunity for this bond.
All right. Thank you very much. Anybody else have any questions for Doug?
Excuse me, I just wanted to remind the board members, can you make sure your laptops are muted? The speakers. Turn off your microphone when you're not speaking. Is that the issue? We're experiencing some echo, so we're trying to solve the problem.
How's that? We're good. All right. Thank you very much, Doug. We'll now move on to the legislative program updates, and we'll start with new legislation.
Yeah, and I'll try to keep it brief because there's some, as Director Waspy, as you pointed out the other day, there's some redundancies in these bills, and many of them are bills that we supported in the last legislative sessions. So just to go through somewhat quickly, the first bill deals with allowing or providing a provision for FEMA to spend mitigation money before a disaster hits to help address the issues of erosion and debris flow after a storm event or a flooding event. And this is because actually associated with vegetation management for clearing for wildfire. And so this would expand the president's scope in terms of the mitigation money to include preparing for future floods while also removing vegetation to reduce the threat of catastrophic wildfire. The second bill is a fairly comprehensive bill on environmental justice. It has three components that are of strong interest to the Park District. It establishes the outdoor codifies the Outdoor Recreation Legacy Grant Program. It currently exists, but it is not codified in a long-term way. And it has a provision that includes special park districts being eligible. It also includes the Transit to Trails grant program that's seeking to provide opportunities for underserved communities to get to open space. There's a separate bill on that later on the agenda. And then repeals the sunset provision of Every Kid Outdoors. That is set to expire. And so this would extend it long term. And that's the free pass for fourth graders to federal properties. The third bill deals with Cesar Chavez and the farm worker movement. It recognizes the trail from Delano to Sacramento. It's about 300 miles, recognizes that as a unit of the national trail system. And then it also recognizes the Keene National Monument that President Obama created as an official unit of the national park system, as well as making some other historic sites eligible for designation. The fourth bill deals with civilian conservation centers. There are 24 of them throughout the country. Director Waspy, you asked me if there were any in California, and to my surprise, there are none. There are 3 in Oregon, 3 in Washington, 2 in Montana, and 1 in Utah, but none in California. So we may want to work on that. But the goal is to have 300 students in each of the 24 going through the program each year in order to build up wildland firefighters. The fifth bill, No Child Left Inside, specifically creates a grant program for environmental education. This version of the bill actually includes local natural resource management agencies as being eligible. In the past, those grants were only eligible for school districts, and now it's including entities such as, I believe, the Park District. Then the sixth bill, Recreation for All, is basically a bill to develop a national strategy for kids to visit federal lands. It's more of a how do we reach out and make communities know that federal lands are there for recreation. The seventh bill, again, Transit to Trails. We mentioned that one earlier. in the context of environmental justice for all. This is just the standalone version. The 8th bill, improving outdoor recreation coordination, is really developing an interagency council for connecting people to their federal lands, similar to the Cantwell bill that we just discussed. But this bill also calls for a promotion of the outdoor recreation industry. And an interesting provision, at least from my perspective, was that it also, the interagency council will coordinate emergency response in the event of public health emergencies. So in the event that federal lands need to be closed for public visitation, there would be a coordinated effort in handling that. Explore America Act does two things primarily. It preserves or directs the Preserve America grant program to, even when it doesn't have funding, to provide technical assistance and other support. That program is chronically underfunded by Congress, but this would make sure that it would continue to be active in communities. And then the other element is really dealing with gateway communities to national units of the National Park Service, acknowledging the cultural and historic elements of the gateway community and working with National Park Service to help interpret that. As we discussed, that could have an impact for cities like Martinez, Concord, Pittsburgh, and Danville, which have units of the National Park Service in them. So those are the 9 federal bills. I am open to going on to the state bills and combining the vote, but if the board wishes to have 2 separate votes, that's fine as well.
I'm sure we don't mind combining them, but are there any questions on the federal bills? Hearing none. Okay, let's move to state and we'll hand them all together.
The first state bill is by Assemblymember Bauer-Cahan. I'm sure that I will not pronounce this correctly, but it's calls for a study of neon actinoids, captinoids, and those are a pesticide insecticide that has similar attributes to nicotine and is being viewed as having a very negative impact on pollinators and specifically bees. So this would call for an understanding of what's actually happening. And then the second bill is also by Bauer-Cahan, and it deals with reservations for state parks. And this could impact Del Valle in that if a cancellation occurs 7 days before the campsite was to be reserved, that goes, if you cancel, you will still get credit for that reservation and can use it for up to 5 years in the future. And then a bill that the committee, and maybe this is a situation where maybe we do want a separate vote, leave it to legal counsel to determine, but the committee asked for us to bring back the California Youth Water Safety Grant bill that provides grants for free swimming lessons to low-income and at-risk youth. It's a very good use of funds. The bill, however, was put on the suspense calendar on May 18th and will not be advancing. Very similar to the second bill, the Recreational Trails Act, that was also put on suspense on the same day, May 18th. But that bill would have created a separate designated funding stream for recreational trails, which is a different category than our active transportation trails network. So with that, those are your state and federal bills. I don't think there's harm in supporting bills, even though they're not moving, but they will not advance. I don't believe.
Any questions or comments?
And if I could just note on the last bill that Eric mentioned, 411, it did in fact pave the way for a budget appropriation of $10 million. It's one time, but it certainly helped to shape a narrative around the need for natural surface recreation specific trails in the state of California.
Questions or comments? Anyone want to make a motion to accept these for support and recommend to the full board support?
I'll make a motion.
We have a motion
I just don't know if there's a member of the public still on.
I'll ask for discussion. If there's a second, I'll ask for discussion.
Well, if you're making a motion, you should take public comment if there is any. I don't know.
There are no public comments on this item.
Okay.
I'll make the second.
Okay, is there any further discussion? Hearing none, Madam Clerk, would you take the roll call vote?
All right, President Waspy,
Aye.
Director Sanwong,
Yes.
Director Coffee.
Aye.
All right, motion passes.
Thank you very, very much. Moving along.
We have 3 bills to watch, and they're all very interesting and I think somewhat complex. But the first bill calls on basically equity in all policies for state agencies. It is something that likely would be a positive thing to support, but want to defer until we have an equity officer at the Park District and have a policy of our own before necessarily endorsing the state policy. The second bill deals with goat herders. And my reading of this bill is that it basically is there is a requirement for the labor commissioner to determine violations of labor standards for goat herders. And then if this legislation does not pass, the policy reverts back to existing provisions. The existing provisions are repealed January 1st, 2024. And this bill would delete the repeal language. And by deleting the repeal language, goat herders would continue to have their monthly minimum wage of $2,755. Repeal of that provision would likely put them in a category where they're subject to statewide labor laws and could ask for the minimum wage. And then the complication there is if they're on call 24 hours, are they working the full 24 hours? So something to watch. It's right now a 2-year bill. And so we'll continue to dig into it and see what impact it might have on Park District grazing efforts. And then the last bill deals with redistricting and requires cities and counties with populations of 300,000 residents and schools and community college with 500,000 residents to implement a redistricting commission. So it takes it out of the hands of the elected officials. And Director Waspy, you asked me who nominates the commission members. And the local jurisdiction can prescribe the manner in which members are appointed, but every citizen in the jurisdiction has to have the ability to apply to serve on the commission. And then the mechanism by which they're appointed cannot be done by the legislative body themselves. They have to determine a system that does not involve their direct involvement. So an interesting take on redistricting for local communities. Special districts are not currently included, but something to keep an eye on for the future.
Thank you.
So that final bill, it specifies school and community college districts, because I believe they are technically special districts also, right?
I think that they probably meet that requirement, although I do not believe they are members of CSDA. So I'm not sure if there is a nuance there. I know that they also have different thresholds for passing parcel tax and bonds. So I think there may be a carve out for school-oriented districts.
And then I had one other question, actually, since you mentioned CSDA. I saw that Ashley went to the CSDA legislative days up in Sacramento. And I went to our Alameda County CSDA meeting right around that time. And there was some discussion about some of the bills that were being reviewed in Sacramento as it relates to special districts. And one of them was about websites. So I don't know if that bill is also still moving forward, but basically the bill would require agencies such as East Bay Regional Parks District to no longer be able to use our current website address. And we would have to spell out the entire district name and have a .gov extension. So I'm not sure if that's something that's still in progress or if that was discussed.
Yes, I'm glad that you asked that question because we've been meaning to have that conversation, that it is still an effort moving forward. And it would require us to change our, to be a .gov as opposed to a .org.
And would that include, you mentioned that the full name had to be there, so it would be East Bay Regional Park District .gov. Ooh. Okay, that's still my inkwell. All right, any other questions, comments? So we don't take any action on the watch, we just watch, right? Okay, great. So we'll move to the state member asks update.
Sure. So just a really brief update. We've had a fairly robust conversation about our federal community project asks earlier with federal advocate Peter Umhofer, but happy to take questions there. And then on the state front, Doug Houston did mention that there is an opportunity to submit asks again to the offices. So by way of a reminder for the board, in January, when we went up to Sacramento, we made a number of asks, a specific one for each office, a priority project that was ready for funding within that member's district. All of them were very positive and supportive of the asks, but they shared with us that it was a budget deficit year. However, we've had two since then who have moved forward asks that they want to champion. So Assemblymember Ortega, following our conversation, immediately wanted to champion the Oyster Bay Public Access Project, which would be providing the first formal point of public access to this regional shoreline. She's been asking for $6 million and continues to advocate on that. And Acting Legislative Assistant Ashley Grenier will give an update on some of the work we're doing with their office during the event section. And then additionally, we wanted to share with the board formally in this meeting that Senator Steve Glazier's office reached out with interest in advancing a member asks on behalf of the Park District. They were reaching out to a number of districts within their district and only moving forward 4. And we're pleased to share that we are one of the 4. The Roddy Ranch Public Access Project for $5 million was moved forward by his office. This again would be a new point of public access, a great opportunity to share about land conservation and creates healthful spaces. And so that one's moving forward. However, after the news we received from Advocate Houston today, we will be reinitiating asks with all of the offices. So by way of example, Assemblymember Buffy Wicks will be reaching out to about the Wildcat Creek Restoration Project at Brooks Road. Assemblymember Tim Grayson will be connecting with his office about funding for tribal consultation and planning at Marsh Creek Trail. And Assemblymember Mia Bonta will reinvigorate our conversations about the Tidewater Public Access Project. A full list of our identified state asks can be found in our 2023 legislative program, which is on the website and was adopted by the board. So I'm happy to take any questions, but just wanted to share with the board that we are still working on our mini asks, and we're hoping for some success this year. Right, it's not a no until we hear a no. And so the final no would come in September. So we're hoping that in September, we'll see it in the budget language or our budget bill. And that's when we'll know that we've been successful. All right, so I'll kick off the first one, which was our Together Bay Area Conference, and then hand it over to Ashley for the rest. So Together Bay Area, as we know, is a regional member organization with land managers, tribal entities, and others who come together to focus on climate and equity issues. Annually, they have a conference in May, of which all East Bay Park staff and board are invited to. And so this one took place on May 9th through 12th. It kicked off on May 9th with a presentation by the Director of State Parks that was rather inspiring over Zoom. On May 10th, we came together in Richmond for an in-person conference, and then the conference was followed up by field trips. And so I'm pleased to share that the Park District was able to host one of the most popular field trips at our McOsker Creek Restoration Project. So folks came out and project manager Carmen Erasmus provided a tour Senior planner Kim Tai also spoke to all of the planning efforts, the foundation, and it was just a really wonderful turnout to have a conversation with colleagues and professionals, and many who worked on the project as consultants out at McOsker Creek. And so we do hope to continue to, actually there's a field trip being hosted today by Together Bay Area out at Roddy Ranch. So that continues. So there's opportunities all throughout the year to host field trips with Together Bay Area, but this one was done as part of the formal conference. So just wanted to share that with the board. And with that, I'll pass it to Ashley.
As Director Sanwong mentioned, I went to the California Special Districts Association Legislative Days in Sacramento, May 16th through 17th. It was my first time attending an event as such in my acting assignment. On the Sunday, we all split up into small groups and met with some elected office staff. Unfortunately, I put Senator Skinner, but I believe it was Senator Glazer's office, so I may have to amend the agenda. But basically, we were all presenting on CSDA's behalf on some of the advocacy priorities. Something that was interesting that weekend is that just now we are starting to define what a special district is, and that's moving forward. And somebody from the National Special Districts Association was also saying they're trying to put language into what is considered an essential infrastructure, and they're trying to get parks and recreation as considered essential infrastructure. So that was interesting for me to learn about, and I can get more information for you about those. I believe Eric or Lisa will talk about the next item.
I think just to state, because there was a lot of conversation about it when Advocate Helmhofer was speaking, that I think may come back to this committee with a little bit more of a what has happened since we were in Washington. We've initiated a number of follow-ups, as Peter mentioned, and would like to bring some of those results back when we have them more realized. So, but really appreciated the board's support, and I think we felt like it was a good 4 days, and we'll look forward to tweaking it a little bit to make it even more efficient in the future.
All right, so number 4 is on June 3rd, we did host a walk and talk or a walking town hall with Representative DeSonia at Big Break Regional Shoreline. And we had about 86 community members come to that town hall, and very well received, led by Supervising Naturalist Wyatt Moore, and Director Coffey was there to provide some remarks as well. Number 5, on June 24th, we will be hosting another walking town hall with Assemblymember Grayson out at Round Valley Regional Preserve. And Supervising Naturalist Pialoff will be the guiding naturalist for that day. Hopefully it won't be too hot out there. Number 6, coming up on July 7th, Lisa was mentioning the Oyster Bay Regional Shoreline public access improvements. So we'll be having a site visit with Assemblymember Ortega. With our design and construction staff, we'll be presenting about ideas for that project. And before we move on to the next item, I do have a public comment about the Oyster Bay Regional Shoreline agenda item C6. Ellie, I will start the timer for 3 minutes, and we will take your comment. Just give me 1 moment. All right, go ahead.
All right. Yeah, the Oyster Bay and the Eden Shoreline are shoreline areas that there has been some semi-serious proposals to bring in additional fill and do beneficial reuse of stockpiled dirt to mitigate sea level rise. And they're doing that already in El Viso. They're doing it using piles of sheet metal, steel plates over in Foster City and at the San Francisco International Airport and so on. So this idea of bringing in dirt and using it for whatever, large volumes of dirt, is very important, because the East Bay Municipal Utilities District in Castro Valley has been talking about using some of the dirt that they have stacked up there and sending it to Oyster Bay. That's they said it wasn't that's a serious, but then they want to start doing that in a couple of weeks. They said it wasn't 100% confirmed, but I imagine if they're talking about doing it in a couple of weeks, it must be 90% confirmed or 99% confirmed. Otherwise, they'd be in big trouble because they're not going to have anywhere to go in a couple of weeks. And what they do over there at the East Bay Municipal Utilities District is very interesting and has very impactful and very deleterious, very adversely impactful on Castro Valley and Briones Orinda. What they have is at 3 sites around Briones and another one over towards Brentwood or somewhere. These 3 sites together have 15 years of capacity, of holding capacity of dirt. They dig up trenches, pipelines, they take the dirt, they take it to these stockpiles, they store them for a while, a year or 2, and then they move it back out to Oyster Bay or wherever. And of course, by having these intermediary storage locations, they're increasing the handling cost. The offloading is $57 a cubic yard. The handling cost in terms of the people of, they're sending trucks to the middle of Castro Valley, the exact middle where the most busiest intersection. And these every 3 minutes, fully loaded dirt trucks with dirt falling off the side of the road. And it annoys the local residents quite a bit. And then to refill the stockpiles, of course, they gradually bring back the dirt trucks the other way. Instead of
Kelly, for your comment,
it's every 3 days. So to conclude, I guess my conclusion is have the Park District should be working with them to have these receiving sites at Oyster Bay or wherever, and try to please, and I guess on behalf of the residents of Castro Valley and Briones Orinda and wherever, please help East Bay Mud so that Castro Valley stops suffering. Thank you.
Right. We'll move on to the next item. 7 is the July 14th Hayward Shoreline. We'll be doing a Hayward Shoreline site visit with the California EPA Secretary Garcia. I will be heading out there with Chris Barton, one of our restoration project managers, to present about a future marsh restoration project out there to keep getting ready for our sea level rise resilience along the Bay shoreline. That's
I can't hear Dennis.
Just trying to avoid the feedback. I just said, I think these are very valuable, these walk and talks, and I'm happy continuing them, and I'm happy we're expanding them.
Agreed.
Any other comments, board members? Hearing none, we'll move to public comment. Do we have a public comment?
Yes, we do have a public comment. Kelly, when you're ready, I'll set. You can go ahead and start.
All right. The pronunciation is neonicotinoids. Neonicotinoids is, and it affects honeybees. A quick note: there's a San Mateo County supervisor who's very proud. He has gotten something like $10 million. Is building a new beach, opening a new beach park at Tunitas Creek, halfway in between Saffron Bay and Pescadero. It's a beautiful beach. So that's really good. Over here, there was a mention of the city of Fremont and the parking restrictions at Mission Peak. The federal government does recreation for all. Fremont does recreation for the few, the proud, the well-connected, and the well-funded. And even the parking tickets they hand out at Mission Peak cost more. They actually raised the rate by 10%. So a parking ticket at Mission Peak costs more than a regular parking ticket. And the several members of the council, including Council Members Campbell, Council Member Shao, Mayor May, they expressed their deep devotion to expanding the parking permit, the restrictions, not only in terms of taking it to 7 days a week, they also wanted to take it to outlaw all parking on city streets nearby Mission Peak. That is why it's recreation for the few and the proud. And when it comes to another thing that we don't talk about it in Fremont is the city doesn't have any helicopters. The helicopter, when there is protest marches and political demonstrations and people and clouds of pepper gas, toxic substance, toxic gases dispersed by the police to control the demonstrations. When that is happening, the helicopter that's overflying these demonstrations a couple of years ago, the demonstrations were for George Floyd. That helicopter was owned by the East Bay Regional Park District. So that shows that we need your helicopters. And if the helicopter base were to move away from Hayward, farther from Fremont, that's bad for me. I'd rather have you guys right here in Hayward, where you are right now. And if you move, I want to know, why are you moving, and where are your criteria that you're using for making that decision? So maybe some liaison meetings with the city would be nice. And then when an overriding theme today was money and looking for money at the federal and state level. I'm digging deep into the sales tax revenue for Alameda County, and the sales taxes are a different form of revenue for these government agencies. And I want to tell you that the city of Fremont's explosive growth in sales tax revenue is something that every other city in the county should be envious of. It is.
Kelly, for your comment, that's been 3 minutes.
Take a look. It's if you want to look at money, look at the explosive growth in sales tax revenues over here. And you guys can tell everybody else to do the same thing. I don't know what the magic is here, but we're doing something. Thanks.
Kelly.
Thank you. There are no further public comments.
Great. Any board comments? Member Stanley?
I have two comments. I'll start with one that hopefully short. Thinking about Washington, D.C., I also just want to share that final night we were there. I had the opportunity to rent one of the Lime e-bikes and go around D.C. I think I did maybe 10 to 15 miles, mostly on those, special bike trails that they have that are, kind of removed from the traffic in DC. And it was such a great experience to go around. And then I did make it to the National Mall on the e-bike. And I was very fascinated that they're allowed to be on the National Mall, but when you're in certain sections, and I believe the National Mall is run by the National Park Service. And when I was near the Vietnam War Memorial, the system was set up where I wasn't able to use a motorized e-bike as I was going along. So you had to manually pedal. But I thought that was a really interesting experience to be at a national park site on the e-bike and see how that works with the Lime e-bike rental. So I'm really grateful to have had that personal experience. And then my second comment that I wanted to bring up, I know earlier this week when we had our board workshop, we did talk about the master plan process that's coming up. And this is something that I personally am really eager to be a part of. And I've been thinking a lot about how we're gathering community insights. And I know that this team has led the community survey initiative. And I don't mean to, I know we weren't prepared to talk about this at this meeting, but we did talk about it at our previous meeting when we reviewed the polling survey and how we run both a polling survey for voters within the East Bay Regional Park District, and then we run a second survey of the community. So that would include folks who maybe aren't registered to vote or aren't citizens, but live in the community. And I'm curious if the legacy of this community survey was it, because we did a community survey for the master plan, I want to say in 2011, I have it pulled up here. There was a survey done in 2011. I think it came through the planning department within East Bay Regional Parks, but could that survey be part of this legacy of the community survey we do, or is it something that's separate? And if you don't have the answers now, that this is something that I would like to be able to explore, as we get the master plan process underway. And I think we heard the timeline was that we'll kind of kick things off starting this fall. So we have a few months before that process starts.
Thank you, Director
Yes.
Swanson. Yes, we'll certainly share your interest and take a look at that as we continue to plan for the master plan. And out of the planning department, so we will certainly share the information with them.
Yeah, because I think that there's a lot of opportunity with this team. I know this is the legislative and government affairs team, but because of all of the survey work that's done here, and I know when I was on the Park Advisory Committee, the PAC, I got to participate in one of the listening sessions. It was during COVID, so it was done online, but it was fine that it was online with UC Davis. And so there's a lot of insights that this team does gather that can be used. And I really think that we have an opportunity to incorporate different types of insights as we put together the master plan. And I just want to make sure that, this group is involved, because I think you have an area of expertise within the Park District organization in regards to these types of insights that can really help us put together a solid master plan.
No, definitely. And I appreciate you raising the inquiry. It's a good opportunity to clarify that the master plan process is across organizational collaboration. So we will definitely have an opportunity to contribute to that process. We'll be actively engaged. And it will bring forward pretty much representatives from the entire Park District, including yourselves. So it's a beautiful, robust process. And the leading entity right now is the General Manager's Office with the Planning Department. So we will be discussing the best ways to approach and engage community input, which we can have a conversation about. Is the tool that we use here the right tool to get what we're looking for in the most meaningful way? So all of that will be incorporated in those discussions.
Thank you.
If you don't mind, just to add to Dr. Alvarez's comments, we're very intentional about the survey work in terms of aligning it with our other divisions, and have had it's early days in the master plan process, but we have had conversations with folks that are working on it, and we'll be working with Dr. Alvarez to make sure that we're all rowing in the same direction.
Colin, anything?
No, thank you. Looking forward to seeing you all at Big Break.
All right. Sounds like fun. Yeah, have a safe trip back. So I have nothing other than to wish everyone a happy Juneteenth. There's many, as noted, there's many programs going on in the district on Sunday and Monday. So take advantage of those and have a great weekend. Take care. We are adjourned.